Good morning. I have been struggling to wake up on Saturdays lately because I have had a pretty crazy time in my practice, which is good. It means the courts are getting stuff done. If you have questions, make sure to type them in the chat log. They may take a little bit to show up, but I will answer them as we get to them. It has been another fairly festive week. Instead of a town hall on Tuesday, I answered some questions on Twitter on Tuesday evening because the storm was not a fan, or my internet was not a fan of the storm. So I haven't been with you all for about a week in video form. So this week has been sort of an overwhelming week. Last night, the post office ripped through some administrative and staffing changes, and we are getting in a place where the post office is not particularly reliable, and that's certainly impacting my work. I'm in a position where I have to call the courts regularly and make sure they haven't mailed out notices that I'm waiting on, or if I have a final order, sometimes I have to go pick it up. So that is something that is impacting my practice, and much more directly people who are getting prescriptions, people who are waiting on checks. There's a lot that goes through our postal service that is critical to people. So that is very problematic. And unfortunately, the Republican Party has moved to a point where they are fine accepting the ends justifying the means. So you're going to see that in a lot of places, right? You're going to see that in them apparently not caring if the Postal Service goes under, one of the most popular services provided by the United States government. You're going to see that in border policy. They're able to justify it. They're able to justify a lot of very inhumane things because the ends are going to justify the means. Um, I think that the problem that a lot of folks have, and honestly, this is something that I faced several years ago, is once you head down the path towards fascism, it's I think there's that reflex to say, well, you can't do that. We've got laws, we've got boundaries, we've got norms. It's not acceptable to do that. Fascism doesn't care. Fascism doesn't care if you think that that's in the rules. Fascism doesn't care if you think something's authoritarian and not acceptable. Fascism doesn't care. It's fascism. So, we have an awful lot of people right now that are in office and running for office that don't seem to understand that if you don't check fascism early and often, it doesn't care. It'll just take over. It's not interested in your opinion. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you think something's against the law. It's fascism. So if you are supporting or have your top priority as candidates as somebody who won't even say the word fascism and won't acknowledge that that is where we are, that person's not qualified. That person, you cannot fight fascism if you don't even acknowledge its presence. And you certainly can't fight fascism functionally if you aren't enforcing early and often. Laws, rules, and norms only exist if they're enforced. And right now we have no enforcement anywhere. That brings me to, what the switch we're starting to see happen. I haven't talked much about this because I'm waiting for this to come since probably early 2017. Um, our president was riding a good economy, so he didn't have to use this lever of power. But we have a president that's pretty devoid of any character qualities most of us would appreciate. And he hadn't really figured out yet that he could just kind of buy votes, right? He hadn't figured that out. He didn't feel like he needed to with his base. There was red tape. People were still sort of pushing back a little bit at the beginning of his presidency. And yesterday he announced that he was going to be making student loan interest go away, and indefinitely um, indefinitely making payments, not something that people needed to make. And that's something that I actually agree with. I think that we should really be restructuring our student loans, and certainly in a pandemic, the interest rate should be zero. Certainly in a pandemic, we shouldn't have loan payments. We should also tackle capitalization. Um, But if he were to actually go through with that, which is semi-likely, he'll do some of it. He probably won't do it as completely as a lot of students would like. But once he figures out that the mechanisms that he has available and the levers of power sort of do anything he wants right now without pushback, he'll go full-blown populism. I don't even need to tamper with the election. I could just buy the votes. I mean, if he were to forgive all student loans, I think a lot of people, I mean, that would be something that helped me financially. A lot of people, particularly Republicans, are willing to forgo checks and balances on human rights, on freedom of speech, on a wide range of things if it's economically beneficial. I mean, how many times have you heard people say, well, the president's a little racist, but I'm not racist, and the economy is so good. Our economy actually hasn't been good. It's been propped up in a lot of ways that are artificial, and there's a lot of people who are falling through the cracks. But the indicators, they were able to make the indicators look very good until quite recently. There was no way to hide in the second quarter that our economy dropped by a third, which is just phenomenal. That has not happened in the decades that we've tracked that. That's huge. There's no way to hide that. I mean, some things get so big that you can't hide it. COVID deaths are probably going to get so big. I mean, they're already tampering with the numbers. They're already manipulating things as soon as, the private force that the president wanted to took over reporting from CDC. We leveled off, which is obviously not accurate. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and it is expanding greatly. And though there may be some progress in some cities, it is completely unchecked in the United States. Completely. So, you're not going to be able to hide that many dead bodies. You can't hide when the economy is doing so poorly that no one has work. You can't hide things that big. You can hide little things, but you can't hide things that big. And, as soon as our president realizes that a lot of the things that the Democrats have not been willing to do, and the Republicans have criticized the Democrats for even entertaining because they were fiscally imprudent, as soon as he realizes that he can essentially buy off with those things without any sort of plan. I mean, I think part of what's hindering the Democrats is they don't really have a great plan to implement it. And it's also incredibly beneficial for fundraising to have an idea but not implement it, because then you can say other people are against you, and that's why you can't do it, and you need to fundraise more money so that you can be in charge longer so that you can do it. I mean, it's very profitable to have conflict. But as soon as he realizes that he can just say, all right, student loans are gone, and not even have to worry about most of the things he's been doing to segue the election. If he actually, just saying it, I don't think we'll do it. I think he's actually going to have to start getting rid of some of those student loans. But if he can get rid of some of those student loans, if he can get rid of other debts, if he waves a wand and makes medical debts go away, if he takes a lot of financial pressure off people who are really struggling, not everyone. That's not going to make me like him. It'll make me be more financially comfortable. It's not going to make me want to vote for him, but a lot of people, that's going to switch their votes. So that is something I haven't really talked about because I didn't, I'm certainly not the only person probably who's come up with that idea, but I didn't want to be the person that somebody on his team saw it from, and somehow in the back of my head think that I had enabled it, but the idea is clearly there now. So, I think that is a phenomenally good checkmate to a lot of Democrat policy, because if the Democrats don't go along with the things that he's proposing, then the Democrats look like they didn't really mean it at all along. And the Republicans are perfectly happy to just get in line and have the ends justify the means and have keeping power be the priority. So watch that space. That's problematic. And I think it's going to ultimately, if he figures out in time for the election that he doesn't even have to destroy the Postal Service, he can keep the Postal Service going, then he just has to turn a few million people by fixing their financial problems. I think that is something that is very dangerous for this upcoming election. Um, I was commenting on this last night, and I had a couple of people, push back and be like, "Oh, Betsy DeVos is going to look at." He doesn't care about Betsy DeVos. He doesn't care about any of these people. He doesn't care about anyone that he's helping. It's transactional. It's a favor exchange system. So, he doesn't. He'll throw anybody under the bus. The only person he won't throw under the bus is himself. So, I'm not concerned about relationships damaging it. I'm concerned about whether or not he figures out the mechanisms that he has in his authority to do it. Technically, he can't just print money. The House has to do it. And people are like, "Oh, he can't print money last night." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the House is run by Democrats, and Democrats have been pushing for student loan reform for a long time. And if they have an opportunity to wipe out student loan debt, it would be just astronomically foolish of them to not take it." So if he starts going down this path and picking off segments and seeing how many votes he gets with each segment, he will become wildly popular very quickly. A lot of the people that supported Bernie will just flip over to him in a heartbeat. And Bernie supporters and Trump supporters have a phenomenal amount in common. I think a lot of people haven't realized that. Some people have realized that, and they're often the same people. They're people who are dissatisfied with the system, and some of those people are not going to be okay with the racism and misogyny and bigotry and hate. A lot of people are not going to be okay with that, but a lot of people are going to justify it. A lot of people are going to say, well, if that's what it takes to get to the programs we need, it's a temporary evil. They're going to go ends justify the means. So Bernie supporters and Trump supporters, they are, though ideologically somewhat different, they are people who have no problem burning down the system if they feel that it expedites their goal. And there is some merit to that argument. I don't want to say that, sometimes a more swift push may not be less damaging. I mean, I have discussed with a lot of voters, that sure, Susan Collins is somebody I'm very unhappy with, but her maximum time in office is probably 6 more years. I can't imagine her going on beyond this term, and I find it very frustrating. I'm clearly running against her. It's clearly problematic, but putting somebody else in place that talks about goals they have no realistic or functional way of achieving, that seems to talk about general goals with just a breathtakingly shallow ability to enact those goals, and having that person be there for 30 years, that's a calculation that may be more damaging. So I know that's a calculation a lot of voters are making, and I think that you're going to see that in a lot of other supporters. And the bottom line is there are multiple valid strategies. There are multiple valid ethical systems. I don't agree with all of them. I don't agree with a tremendous amount of things that this administration is doing. I can certainly note when they do good things. Obviously, forgiving student loan debt would be a phenomenal thing for millions, tens of millions of Americans. But everything that happens in a transactional government comes with a price, and that price to get student loans forgiven may be another 4 years of Trump. So just be aware that is coming, and that may not be the end of it. He may go into medical debt. He has personally gone through multiple bankruptcies where he's managed to maintain and retain everything. Essentially, he's lost very little in a bankruptcy. And if he's able to realize and recognize that he can harness that in exchange for votes, and it won't be a one-to-one exchange, but he's going to buy votes basically. Once he realizes that, I would not be surprised to see a whole bunch of things fall. So I think that he'll drop whatever he needs to stay in power, because power is, money's his motivator, but power helps him acquire that. So, look for student loans. I would guess the next to fall would maybe be medical debts. those are really easy to justify because they are things we should be doing. So, and they're things that he'll have broad support from Democrats on. He'll be able to whisk those through the House very quickly, and we already know that Republicans in the Senate will pretty much do whatever he tells them to. So, I mean, these are reforms he can move through very swiftly and very quickly increase his popular vote and his approval rating. Um, so I would guess those two. Um, there's several other mechanisms he can get into and several other ways he can buy votes. I don't know if I want to go too much further into them. Again, I'm sure people are thinking about them, but I don't want to be the person who's up at night because I feel like I've passed those out. But I mean, I would not be surprised to see student loans. I don't know if they will actually be forgiven or all of them will actually be forgiven, but I don't start seeing that as a stump point. And Democrats should be both happy and incredibly nervous about that. I mean, I think they're likely to get that policy goal achieved if they work with him. But I also think that they're giving him a race if they do that. And medical debt. And again, I can think of 5 or 6 other areas where he could just flip those levers and pick up huge chunks of support without any real consequence to him. And but there will be consequences to us. So things to look at. So please continue to push on any elected officials you have on the federal level about the Postal Service. The Postal Service isn't just about voting. I think that our federal government will throw it under the bus for that, but it does so much. It is such a valuable and important service that we should not lose that in a partisan war. We should not let that become partisan. I am looking forward to being able to do some events, hopefully in the next few weeks, if things stay mellow. In the state of Maine, we've sort of been a little bit of ticking up, it looks like, but our cases are still really low. It looks like we're reporting 20 to 30 cases most days, which is still pretty low. So I may do some events in outlying areas. We'll be checking schedule on that. Still going to be doing the 2 digital town halls per week. You can still find me online. If you have any questions, let me know. And I may be having some projects for you guys to work on soon. So I haven't seen any questions. If there's anything you need, you know how to find me, and I will see you all online. I'll see you Tuesday by video.